Here to lead our discussion on forming strategic partnerships, we have the co-founder and strategic director of the BIO, or is it BIO or BIO?
BioSmart.
BioSmart. Well, we're in German. They say BIO sometimes, so I get confused. Of the BioSmart group, let's hear it for Morris Beagle.
Woo, thank you guys. We ready to roll?
Do your thing, man. Get
All
into
right.
it.
Well, how are we doing? Oh, there's Michael. How are you doing, sir? Good. You know, your daughter was at my event a couple weeks ago in Denver. So my name's Morris Beagle, and I've got a company called the BioSmart Group. It's a consulting company. I've also been in the hemp space for the last 14 years. I produced a show called NOCO Hemp Expo for 11 years, and I just started a new show called Industrial Hemp International, or IHI, that we did in Denver a couple weeks ago. And I've been fortunate enough to work with Alex Rogers for quite some time. I spoke at his event in San Francisco in 2020, right before the pandemic. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have changed since that time. But I basically come from the hemp side. I've done a lot of media stuff and a lot of event stuff, originally from the music industry. And I'm going to have each of these esteemed panelists kind of introduce themselves, and then we'll get going on strategic partnerships and transactional partnerships and so forth. So go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Seal. I'm based out of Canada. I have my own company. I'm very originally called Sarah Seal Inc. because I had to come up with something very quickly. I'm a management consultant. I'm in the space. I've been operating on the Canadian market for the last 10 years. I support all of the people basically say that I am the people problem solver. So I align the people processes with business strategy. I've got an MBA. I'm a business strategist at heart. I've also got my CHRP, and I'm an advanced change management practitioner. I've worked with most of the major players in the space over the last 10 years, scaling up, scaling down, mergers and acquisitions, aligning all those people processes that happen during an acquisition. Unfortunately, in the Canadian market, we've had a lot of close downs, CCAAs, which is creditor protection, and all of the processes that go into that. I like to build high-quality teams, high-performance teams that really drive the efficiency of a company and help to make it profitable.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Mansfeld. I'm the Managing Director of EU Canada Jobs. We've been around about 4 or 5 years, and we are a jobs board and recruiting agency for the cannabis industry here in Europe. I actually got started in a cultivation project down in Portugal and realized that it was very difficult finding your key personnel that you need for licensing for a cannabis project in Portugal, but also then, once you're running it. So kind of saw the need for that. I'm from Colorado, very familiar with the industry there, and so decided to kind of take this on as a project a number of years ago, and it's been quite fun, quite interesting. European industry is, as everyone knows, going through lots of changes, but all heading in a generally positive direction. So it's a great time to be involved in it, and so looking forward to the discussions.
Hey everybody, Ian Miller here. I am the Executive Chairman of Catalyst BC. Our practice is a broad-based international consultancy that focuses effectively on sort of founding to exit support for effectively high THC cannabis businesses. In general, we help our clients to design and invest intelligently, effectively spending money on things that they actually need to spend money on, rather than sort of the various toys that we often see laying around facilities that aren't terribly utilized. And we help our clients to operate effectively at the highest possible yields, throughput, margins, and gross enterprise value. I'm also here at this particular conference partially as a guest of the nation of Sri Lanka to sort of guide them to the extent that I can as they launch their foray into the medical cannabis space.
Michael Bernstein. I'm the CEO of Laurel Crest. We're primarily in the cannabinoid space, CBD, and other products. I started my career as a Wall Street lawyer. I found it difficult to be a lawyer and then be a drug dealer.
Preach.
Bought part of the public company that I was running after practicing law, sold it, and went into the CBD space in Slovenia in 2015, got involved in the supply chain from the US, then set up Laurel Crest in about 2017. We're primarily a supplier of bulk ingredients. The biggest products that we have, we produce CBG in crystal-resistant distillate. We've gone through massive change in the United States in the hemp business. If I look at our business a year ago, we're down, US business, we're down about 50%, and it's all been replaced by business here in Europe. I hate dealing with the legal issues in the States. They're only getting worse. And nobody really knows in the States whether there's going to be an effective hemp business. If the current legislation holds, without exception, I believe 50–70% of the industry will fail.
Well, I would agree with you on that. We do have our issues in the United States. And that's a warning to the EU not to follow the same path as the United States has gone with how we've dealt with taking cannabinoids and converting them. And from my position, looking at kind of hemp as a commodity crop and so forth, I think that we should be able to do conversions and synthesize stuff, but in a way that would be responsible and not necessarily to the intoxicating level, that would deal more with polymers and a variety of other things, just like corn and soy and all these other crops that have all kind of precursor molecules and do all that stuff. But that's really not about the partnership side of things. We'll move right into that, and we'll start with you, Sarah, and then we'll just kind of go down the line. And what does a strategic partnership look like in your particular world?
Yeah, so in the Canadian market, for me personally, a strategic partnership is a company that I can align with so that I'm offering the best services to my clients. When I go in, because of the nature of the role that I have, I'll go in and I see a variety of problems. I'll see operations problems, I'll see quality problems, their licensing issues, their logistical problems. So being able to bring really valued and trusted people, people that I've worked with, that I know can execute, to the table, into my clients to give them the very best that I can offer and to solve all of their problems. That's really how we work in the Canadian space. It's not a pay-for-play. We don't do a lot of referral fees on it. Some people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a core group of us that work really well together, and it's not about bringing somebody in because I get a 5% kickback. It is truly about bringing in the best person for the space so that I'm giving my clients the very best.
I think a couple of the most important things with a strategic partnership is one of them is transparency. What I've experienced is talking with potential partners and literally not being able to get straight answers out of them for simple questions. I'll use a personal example from several years ago when I was involved in a cultivation project, and we actually were talking with Juicy Fields, which probably most people here are familiar with that company. And luckily, we did not end up doing any type of partnership with them, but it was because they were not transparent. They couldn't answer that simple question, where is your offtake that you claim to have? They would never answer that. Obviously, a huge red flag. So we didn't know, was this, were they not being honest, which they weren't, but we assumed they were selling illegally or something. We didn't know that it was as big of a scheme as it was. But point being, transparency. And I think that's very hard to gauge, of course, but usually you get a feeling about that. And another important part, I think, in partnerships that often gets overlooked is, the written part. Having a clear understanding, written down of what the goals are, but also having a exit strategy, not in the terms of selling the company, but if this partnership doesn't work, how do you unravel it? Because it might not work, but you should always have that a clear understanding of how that would work to unravel it, so that you do have that exit strategy available, and it can avoid a lot of headache and consternation at the end.
Yeah, right on. I'll echo a lot of what Sarah and Andy have mentioned already, and I'd like to introduce, I think, a couple of words into the conversation, one of which is coopetition. So coopetition essentially says this is a non-zero-sum game among potential competitors. We see this rather constantly, right? And I'll give sort of an example, right? In new markets, we often see licensees regard one another as peer competitors, and they, in my view at least, incorrectly assume that they're in a zero-sum game. That simply isn't the case. In many instances, even take hemp, right? Bad actors have a way of impacting other bad actors. Good actors have a way of impacting other actors within their space. And in very many cases, collective advocacy for everyone in the otherwise competitive pool is a really important feature of the marketplace. This also includes understanding whether you're inside of strategic interdependence versus strategic independence, right? So those are kind of the I think, three terms I'd like to introduce into the conversation for whatever they're worth. And then to sort of, I think, more specifically get into it, operators in any business space, but certainly in the cannabis space, where there's again, I think, misinterpretation that, like, this is weed, it'll grow, I can throw a seed over my shoulder into the ground and I'll get a weed plant. Like, yeah, you will. But if you want to go to scale, this space is extraordinarily complex, right? We are in a space that includes ultra-controlled regulations, highly controlled in many ways, cultivation, environment, and so on and so forth, traditional punnet-based breeding, molecular genetic breeding, consumer packaged goods, highly regulated structure, retail, and very sort of non-traditional and convoluted supply chains, both on the incoming supply chain and outgoing supply chain side of the equation. So a lot of things boil down to what we internally call the triad, which is capability, bandwidth, and desire. If you or your company have all three of those, go do the thing. If you don't have all three of those, you need to figure out, do I in-hire? Do I get a sort of strategic relationship, a transactional relationship, or do I bring in a full partner to backfill those things that I don't have? And in such a complex space, that becomes very, very important to do.
In our case, the complexity is our supply chain is often our competitors and our customers. And when you have that type of situation, if you're going to be honest and transparent, as Andy was mentioning, if you're giving a potential competitor enough information so they can understand your business, you're in large part putting them in a space where they can become your worst competitor. So when you have to operate on that fine line, if you can find people who you can trust that aren't going to take your confidential information and use it, it becomes critical to your business. An early experience I had in Slovenia, we're meeting with a large customer with the head of sales of the company that I own part of. And he was explaining how we own the largest hemp farm in Croatia, which we didn't. And after the meeting, I said to him, well, why did you say that? He said, well, customers expect you to be vertical. I said, well, we have a requirements contract with that farm. We take 100% of their offtake. Why would you not why didn't you tell the truth? He said, well, you just don't understand the European market. Well, to me, that type of signal, when I'm dealing with anyone, when I hear something that I know isn't true or I suspect isn't true, I tend to write off that supplier or customer. The problem is, if you do that extensively, you have no suppliers and no customers. And I have never been, I was in the textile industry before this and running a public company. I had never experienced people who will sit and just lie to your face, like I find in this business. People who claim they're making product, basically they're just distributors. And then you say, well, I'd like to come see your operation, and then their operation is confidential, all IP, you can't go see it. So all of these signals say, well, that's someone I shouldn't deal with. But then who are you going to deal with? And if I found, and we have some good partners who we trust, and we try to enlarge our business there. But I've never seen an industry this difficult to find transparent, honest people.
Okay, so in cases like that, would you then more lean towards transactional relationships where it's like, this isn't going to be really strategic, but there could potentially be a transactional relationship where you could stomach working that without costing yourself your integrity?
I think it's easier on our end to really partner with customers. It's the supply side that is quite difficult. Our major product that we have and that we're exporting here to Europe, we have to deal with competitors. And we almost have to buy from multiple people, because if we bought too much from one, we're going to encourage them to be in that business.
And talking about transactional relationships, let's just kind of go down the line. And the difference in your business with a strategic partnership and a transactional partnership.
Yeah, so for me, first of all, I completely agree with what you're saying. Smoke and mirrors is what we call it in Canada. Everybody has the best premium product. I had somebody just yesterday tell me how great their product and their grow was, and I was like, I've been in your facility. Like, no, you have moldy product in the back and your staff are really unhappy. You do not have the best premium quality product. But yeah, so it is, and I've also never seen it in any other industry. Transactional versus long-term strategic. So we were talking a little bit about this in the back, because we have transactional relationships with people that I also consider long-term strategic partners with. And they're plug and play consultants that I'll see a problem, or my client brings forward a problem, and I have trusted people that I can bring in. They come in, they solve that problem, then they leave. We might not work together again for another 2 or 3 years, but in 2 or 3 years, when we do have that problem again, that's the person that's going to be the first person that I call. So it works both ways. There's some people that I work continuously with, and I have for the last 10 years, and all the different iterations that the business has gone through. And then there are other people who, they leave, they change focus. Companies, especially in the Canadian market, it's very hard to find anybody who's in the same position that they were in 2 years before. So you form those long-term relationships with the actual people, not necessarily the function that they provide.
Andy?
Yeah, so, in the recruiting job board kind of space, there are only a few companies that are doing what we're doing. And, I've met them all, and we get along fine, but we are direct competitors. So, a true strategic partnership hasn't really been discussed, at least from my side. Certainly, we've discussed cooperating and things like that, but really, the types of partnerships that we have are really transactional ones with the companies that are our clients. Where some of them come back to us for repeat business, and we discuss, how we can cooperate better, make sure that we work better, more efficiently together, and things like that. But yeah, so for us, really, it's a transactional type situation, and there's not a lot of people that we could be a true strategic partner to. Yeah.
Ian? So I'm going to, I think, echo a little bit of what Sarah had to say. We're actually finding here in the green room and on stage that our spaces kind of overlap a little bit in, I think, a very positive way. Ultimately, the relationships that you're going to form, to be completely candid, I'm not sure if a lot of what's happening in the space is true strategic partnerships. I think, as Sarah mentioned, there are really trusted vendors, effectively, that you have that are sort of transactional, but they're also in the family. Maybe that's the right way to say it. Where, interestingly enough, we have sort of between her and I a position with respect to sort of regulatory compliance, that we have like a pocket ninja that we pull out when we need that job done. It's a different person, but when we were speaking earlier, we realized that effectively that role is very much the same. And I think many people in the space are finding that those can be some of the most instrumental relationships that they have, in fact, is people that they can trust that still remain, I'm not sure if lone wolf is kind of the right term, but independence, effectively, that you know you can rely on every time you call on them. And in many ways, I think that that's one of the best things that anyone as a vendor in the space can do, in fact, is to prove to their real or potential counterparties that they are as reliable as their potential counterparties need them to be at any given time. And that's really getting down, I think, to the core very much of actually what you were saying, Michael, right, is that the bona fides, the sort of trust structures in this space can be quite challenging. And I think we probably want to get more onto the topic of like what do strategic partnerships look like, rather than saying like they're really difficult. And so that might be something that we want to kind of like regather to. But the long story short, real, true strategic partnerships in this space are very challenging, because you have a lot of people who are full of it, just to call it what it is, right? Smoke and mirrors, lies, bad bona fides, fake it till you make it. I mean, you call it whatever you like. Sifting through those is extraordinarily challenging. Anyone who has been in this space for a period of time will tell you that. And so essentially sifting through the chaff to get the wheat, as it were, is the path effectively to striking true strategic partnerships. Just call it what it is.
Do you mind if I just add a comment onto that? Because you used the word that these people become family. And I truly do believe that. There are certain people that I have strategic partnerships with that if they call on me to go into their client, it actually stops being about me. It stops being about the job that I'm doing. I always want to do a good job, but I really value that partnership so much, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the best for them. I'm not letting them down, and I'm also making them look really good to their clients. So there's definitely like a family aspect that comes into play with that you just don't have with other partnerships.
That's true. You show up for the people that you love and you care about in a really meaningful way, and that's the best relationships, I think, that we've seen.
Where I've seen effective strategic partnerships tends to be with our customers, to the ones that allow you to be strategic partners, because they'll be honest with you as to where their business is going and where yours is, so that you're not misaligned. Our transactional business tends to be on the supply side, with one exception. We've had a long-term relationship with a company that we're actually now growing with. They're a vertical company, they also grow. My experience dealing with farmers in the past has been very negative. So I see it mostly transactional on supply side.
If I may, what would you say are the defining characteristics of that one key relationship that you find to be positive? Because I think that's actually quite instrumental for the conversation here, is like, let's flag the green flags.
Well, from the very beginning, a lot of people wouldn't let you into their facility. From the very beginning, this particular supplier and customer of ours opened their facility up and shared information as to how we could do business. The principal of the company and I became personal business friends, and enough where we were able to speak about prospective employees, his experiences, and he was always candid, I was always candid with him. So in a relationship now that goes back about 8 years, I never had an instance once where a problem wasn't dealt with or where he wasn't honest with me and the same with us. And what I've told our people, I said, I don't care what the competitors do. Tell the truth when you're out in the marketplace. If we're basically distributors, we're distributors. Where we're manufacturers, we're manufacturers. I never want to hear we manufacture a product that we don't. Because to me, once I hear that, that to me is a significant negative. And if we have a supply chain problem and we have a customer, tell the customer what the problem is. Don't substitute. What we found the biggest problem on the supply side is people would substitute, show you one thing, ship another. And I said, we'll never do that, and we haven't. But it's a tough industry. I mean, regulation, I don't know. I was dealing with a customer and a supplier in California. And when the law changed in California fairly dramatically, I said, well, how is that going to affect your business? What are you going to do about it? He said, nothing. And I said, what do you mean nothing? Aren't you concerned? He said, no, it'll never be enforced. So basically you have this very gray market on top of everything else that makes the business really a lot of fun for an ex-Wall Street lawyer. You just look at it, and at the beginning, I would have never dealt with that person. Now, he's actually a pretty honest guy in comparison to most.
So you touched on kind of some of these red flags and the trust issues, which is where you would probably start to walk away from one of these relationships. What are some other red flags, and this is for anybody who wants to chime in here, that are going to make you think, this probably isn't working, I'm going to try to figure out how to exit?
Yeah, I can start that off. I've dealt with a lot of these. The very first company that I opened up in the space, I had 2 partners on it, and there were so many red flags. I was very naive at the beginning. I truly believed that people in front of me were who they said that they were, and it turned out that these 2, they were not. They were there to exploit what I was setting up. They saw the value in it, and they took. I ended up losing half of my company and having to close it down and then start back up and rebrand myself because I ignored the red flags. So for me, a lot of it was on, it was execution and timelines with the nature of the consultancy that I do, especially if we're working with companies that are in distress or in CCAA. We have 3 months to do a turnaround, and everybody has to be on call. There is no work-life balance. Your phone has to be on. You're working Sundays. You're taking calls late at night. That's just the nature of what you're signing up for, especially with a creditor protection. And so when you start seeing people falling off, they're not available, they're not showing up on calls, they're going off early. That's one of it for me. If they can't execute and they can't actually put in the time, that's a major red flag, and that's not what we agreed to.
I mean, I would say along the same lines, it's, when you have those partners, early on we had an IT partner, and they're supposed to do all the IT, and then they just started missing deadline after deadline. And they were redirecting the people who were supposed to be, just on our project to other projects, to the point where we had to break up that partnership, this partnership, and go our own way, which cost, of course, tons of time and money. But it's just recognizing early on when people are not doing what they said they would. And you don't want to do that. You want to believe in the other person. You want to believe the excuses, but you just need to recognize that early. And that's where it's important to have that off-ramp where you can then say, you're not performing. You know, here we put it in writing that this is the way we'll separate then, and I'm going to take this off ramp now, early on. You know, you've got 2 more chances, 1 more chance, whatever you feel comfortable with, but really holding people to those deliverables. And too often, you know, you're going to have to take that off ramp, I think, multiple times. Also, it's not just with strategic partnerships, it's also with suppliers and different, you know, all kinds of different people you work with. But when people aren't delivering, you just need to call it out when you see it and figure out the next move and not dwell on it and let it fester for too long.
Ian?
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I'm going to give sort of a checklist. Lack of seriousness. If your counterparty is not serious, don't engage. A misunderstanding of the value proposition or the value exchange between you and them as counterparties. If there's a fundamental misunderstanding of that, get out. Lack of sophistication. To an extent, let's be honest, this space very much started with the hallmark of lack of sophistication, not because anyone didn't possess it in certain elements. It's simply, this is a new and complex space, right? So building sophistication within the space is challenging, but that should be a pursuit that everyone is focused on. Lack of practicality, lack of track record, lack of reasonability, lack of transparency, lack of ability to show up with true bona fides. Those are all very, very important for, you know, effectively evaluating who it is that you're dealing with. And I would add one, and this is maybe even going to be kind of a funny one. If you find yourself getting responses that are clearly and obviously generated by an LLM, that counterparty does not know what they're doing, and you should stop. That may change, right? LLMs and AI are getting much, much, much more useful, but large language model, that's all things ChatGPT and so on and so forth. Well, if you're going to be doing any strategic partnerships, learn the signs. But the bottom line, effectively, is that you cannot crib professionalism, and that's what this space needs, right? You either are real or you're not, and overusing these tools effectively is a simple path for, I think in many ways, the kind of folks that you were talking about, Michael, unserious people to fake their way into the good graces of people that, for better or worse, are really looking to do actual serious business, and you can find a lot of time wasters and get rid of them that way.
That was a great list.
Without repeating what you just said, which I agree with, if you look at the history of the business, who started it, half of the people were black market drug dealers coming out of primarily cannabis. And they saw this huge, in our space, in the CBD space, they saw this huge opportunity. So you find a bunch of black market drug dealers now in this space, and the ethics that they brought to the table were not at the highest level. So you start dealing with those people, and then you say, well, that's not going to work, even though they have a product that you think might be useful. And this is but more on the supply side than the customer side. And then you look at the other 50%. 25% of those people you don't want to deal with. And that leaves you with finding who the other 25% are. And I've been in the business a long time. I think it's been cleaned up fairly dramatically because the industry has become very difficult. Lots of people closed down. Some of the worst people in our industry, some of them were large, they're out of business. So now you don't have as bad a group, but you don't have a history in the industry of transparency and honesty. And the other thing no one has mentioned, I think the strength of brokers, at least in the CBD business, really have damaged the industry by two things. One, driving the price down. And two, when they become your salespeople, you really don't know what they're telling your customers. So you lose control. So a lot of large transactions that are done through brokers, you're really not sure exactly what has been said, what the expectations are. In the early days, when CBD isolate sold for $8,000 a kilo, everyone would say, well, we need to see your proof of funds. So I remember one transaction, and I was totally against doing it, but I needed the product. I sent my proof of funds. Then the guy said, oh, I'm sorry, I sold it to someone else. 2 days later, someone was trying to buy from me, and I said, well, how do I know you can handle it? They said, well, I'll send you my proof. It was my proof of funds that came back to me 2 days later. And you see the same thing with COAs, where you provide a COA and then someone provides it back to you saying, this is my product. Well, it was your product to start out with. So that is happening in the industry all the time. And then banking relationships, which no one has mentioned, you had most banks that wouldn't bank our industry. Now there are a few that will. But we were being paid by banks that wouldn't bank the industry. So that means that my customer is banking with someone that they're not telling them what their business is. And I've been thrown out of 2 banks. Interesting stories, but
I've been thrown out of 3 banks.
3
And I don't even touch the plant, so it's like.
I don't touch your plant either.
yeah.
But thank all you for the insights. We've got a few minutes left to take some questions here from the audience. If anybody wants to pop over to the microphone and ask a question. Anybody?
Are you all just full of knowledge? You don't need to know anymore? Let's
E-
hear it for the panel, first of all.
Ian or Bo, you probably have a question. Do you even know what we're talking about?
Bo almost always has a question.
Bo always has questions.
Bo knows.
Bo does know. He always asks the best questions at my event.
Bo frantically scanning. What are they talking about?
Strategic partnerships. And like I've got a strategic partnership, as does ICBC and a lot of conferences, with Bo Whitney, who provides great economic data to the industry throughout the entire world.
Throughout the world. He always knows his things.
Take
All
a
right.
bow, Bo.
Let's hear it for Bo Whitney, everybody.
Bo Whitney.
Geez, not too much pressure there. I've been talking so much about this stuff that I'm losing my voice. But as you form these strategic partnerships, it's a sense of community, right? And so you're developing a community. How do you, first of all, source these in terms of, just in general, and then how do you add to your community as you move forward?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and especially on the fly like that. Good for you. Right? Yeah, well, for me particularly, I look for, I'm one of those people who I will tell you exactly what I don't know. I'll yell to the hills what I do know, but I will also tell you what I don't know. So I look for my particular gaps in knowledge and the gaps that I have in my business model and what my clients are asking for. And then I find the people that are the best at that, and I form strategic partnerships with them. So because you shouted out one, I'll shout out one as well. David Hyde is in the crowd. He's one of the best possible examples of a strategic partnership that I can ever talk of, both in how he set up his business and how we've worked together for 10 years. We've worked together in M&As, in CCAAs. We've worked together in Barbados, helping them with their legalization. There are lots of different facets in different areas. But it's at the very beginning, it was one of my clients had a very serious problem on the regulatory and compliance side, and we connected there. He was the best in the industry, and I wanted to be able to give that to my clients. So I've set that up strategically over the years with people. Nobody's as good as David, but with people like David.
Fantastic. Jamie has a question.
After that commercial for Hyde Advisory,
You gave one to Talman as well. He's the best.
facts. I have a question. It's a speed round. I want each one of you to answer this. And it's basically one word. I feel like in a strategic partnership, there's two sides to it, right? What's in it for me and what's in it for you. I want to know, is it my job to take care of myself, and is it also my job to be aware of what the win is for the other person, or is that their job and their job alone? So, mine or theirs? Whose responsibility is it?
Both.
I agree,
Both.
because you need to know what's in it for them, because and that's part of that transparency. You both need to be very honest about what you're trying to get out of it, because otherwise you're going to get screwed at the end because their goals are totally different than yours. So you both need to. That's where you really need to be transparent and honest with each other, so you can align on what you're trying to get. Otherwise, if their goals are completely different because you don't know them, then there's stuff going on back behind the scenes that's going to hurt you.
And it's setting those expectations as well, like what is success in this partnership? What are, when we first started off today, that was one of the things that we talked about that I did very wrong with my first company, was not actually setting out what are the metrics of success, how do we need to execute, what do timeframes look like? So yeah, it's also setting that out.
Absence of balance yields a deal that has no longevity.
That's true.
Wow,
I think
you're
what
like the
happens a lot,
Yoda
though,
of
is
strategic
that-
partnerships.
Yeah, that's a mic drop moment. But I think a lot of what happens is, especially when you're doing cross-border work, the culture isn't always, there's a buyer beware element in a lot of cultures, and they're like, well, if you aren't being aware, I'm going to take advantage. And Ian, your point's correct. If there's imbalance, it's going to fall apart. But I think that's what the one piece of advice I would give is you got to look for the imbalance, because sometimes you don't even know it's there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right, let's hear it again for the whole panel. We do have to move along. That was fantastic. Come on in. Come on in. All right. Jan's going to take your picture, and then we're going to move on. This is the International Cannabis Business Conference 2026, Berlin, Deutschland.